you're promoting a culture as a company that you care about your team and your housekeepers if you're willing to go and add opportunities for them to increase their earnings.
I am joined by Brandon Reed, principal at Reed Hospitality Asset Management, 30-year career in hospitality operations. Joining us from Gallatin, Tennessee. It's basically Nashville, right? Right outside Nashville.
Yeah, just 20 miles outside of downtown Nashville.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing fantastic. Looking forward to this. How are you?
I'm good. Well, and over the years, you've dealt a lot with operations. And so we're going to talk about the labor shortage.
Sure.
And I'll start off with a question that seems a little odd, possibly, because the headlines everywhere across the globe, there are labor shortages, especially hospitality. But how do we know if we're having a shortage?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and it seems like it would be self-evident, right? And it's one of those, logical 101 type of questions. But actually, the first thing when I go into situations, I'm a turnaround specialist now, and I've been doing this for so long. And how do we know? I'll even go a step further. Is where are we? As far as the amount of staff that we have. And I've gone into plenty of properties where I've gone in there and I've looked for the compendium, and a compendium is a list of all your employees and associates and team members that you have. And so there'll be a lot of times I'll go in there and I'll say, okay, now mind you, I work for properties from 30 room inns all the way up to 7,000 room properties. Okay. So I can have a lot of FTEs and a lot of bodies and full-time equivalents. And they won't know how many people I actually have in their department, believe it or not. And so I start there first. Okay. So I see what they're allowed from the budgeting standpoint. And then I work my way into that. So that's the first thing that I do. I want to find out, well, how many resources are we allowed, and how many do we currently have?
People in operations, managers, they're reading the headlines. They're feeling some pain, but they're not exactly sure, is what you're telling me.
What I'm telling you is that they're not always organized. And you have to be organized in the data and the information that you have in order to be able to combat the issues that you're facing. You have to understand what those issues are even. And it seems like that would be simple, like they would know that right off the bat, but I can tell you I've made a career off of going into departments and properties and divisions, and that's where I start first. As I start from the very basics. What are you allowed to have? What do we have? And then I take it from there and I say, okay, what do we really need? And I do that by doing, time assessments, analysis. What are the objectives? For example, I work a lot with housekeeping because that's the most labor intensive department that we have. And so you're always looking to find shaving off minutes, right? So the more minutes you can get off of the time that it takes to execute their duties as far as cleaning those rooms, the better it is because it flows down to the bottom line. So in other words, you have a 1,000-room hotel. Let's say you need 20 housekeepers to clean that. Let's say at least 100 housekeepers, right, to do a turn on a hotel. So what you're trying to do, if you have a head count of 20 or 15, trying to take it from 20 people that you need and find ways where you can be efficient enough to bring it down to 15 housekeepers that I need, right, to clean a house, meaning property. So in that process, you're looking for the efficiencies. What can I cut out? How many steps are we taking to do from walking to the linen closet and back to the room? All the way down to the weight of the carts. All of those things, you take a scientific approach to it and combine that with the objective. In other words, like a 3-star property may not be as stringent as a 5-star property, right? So a 5-star property, a checkout may take 45 minutes on average to do a checkout versus a 3-star property might take 30 minutes, right? So there's a lot of knowledge that goes into this. There's a lot of data that needs to be extracted, if you will. And so that's what I do. I come in, where are we? What are we allowed to have? The second thing is I start collecting data to be able to make decisions that are smart decisions.
So if they're not organized, they probably don't know what it's costing them.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah. You know, I'll give an anecdotal, a quick one, because I know we're short on time here. Here's an example of where it becomes an issue. So you have this big behemoth resorts, right? And I'm not going to name any names, but because this is actually quite common in the industry abroad, or any industry for that matter, is that you have corporate finance guys, right? And so they'll look at the P&Ls and they'll say, oh, great, profit and loss statement, and they'll say we crushed last year, and we beat it by 10% as far as down to the bottom line. Then they'll go and say, wait a minute, though, what we could have done better because we only ran at 89% occupancy. Why didn't we run it at 94% occupancy like we normally do? We would have even capitalized more on that. And so the conversation now becomes, well, that's because we don't have enough staff. Now, this is a recent actual conversation, by the way, between two executives, an executive property level and executive corporate level, right? And you would think that, unless you're under a rock, you would think that everybody knows that there's a labor shortage out there. So what happens is that if you don't have enough housekeepers, for example, you have to hang those rooms. So in hanging rooms, that means you have to take those rooms out of order, which is what this particular property had to do. And many properties are having to do, by the way. And what does that do? Even though the demand is there, that you're losing revenue because you have to shut those rooms down because you don't have the labor to go out there. So it's costing you in a couple of different ways. In this instance, it's costing you a potential revenue.
So what can we do about the labor shortage?
Well, so that goes back to collecting data, doing time studies, and then once you take that information, I'm kind of a data geek, if you will, but I take all of that information and then I make decisions upon that. Okay. So my biggest push right now, and it actually has been for the last 20 years, is to find technology to help complement or replace some of that labor that's aging out. And quite frankly, this next generation of workers and that aren't interested in being in the hospitality service side as far as labor. So meaning manual type of labor. So finding self-cleaning showers, self-cleaning toilets, beds that can take away 50 to 60% of cleaning in the room. So now that room that would take you 30 minutes to clean, you can bring down now to maybe 15 minutes to clean. You're reducing your reliability on your labor, and you're increasing your assets because you're buying those as assets and depreciating them out. And that's the best way to go about anything in business, is to take the data, look at the data, see what that data means, and then take action on that data. And so I'll give you an example. At a property that I was responsible for the cleaning, it was 2 million square feet of area, that public spaces. I was tasked to eliminate 30 FTEs, full-time equivalents, which means shifts, basically, take shifts out. And so how do I do that without sacrificing the quality of cleaning, right? So I had to figure out how am I going to cut out 30 people and still make this place sparkle. And what I did was I went to machinery. I got ride-on equipment that could do the same amount of work that 8 employees could do. And then when I go in to ask for these, I may ask for $300,000 worth of equipment, but that $300,000 of equipment might replace, $500,000 worth of labor. So you're always looking at that net effect, and how it hits the financials is different and all that stuff too. But that's how you combat it. I mean, everything that you do in your business, you should be taking data, collecting the data, and then taking action taking action steps against that.
We'll pull in, what we do, digital tipping, and maybe even talk about rates. Let's just say for housekeeping, and the rates seem to be going up across the board. I don't know exactly what that does operationally to a hotel. And the opportunities for cashless tipping seem
Yeah.
great, and it's kind of an easy install. It's kind of a no-brainer to me, but from your perspective, what do you see?
Yeah, it's an interesting comment. So yeah, a lot of these things seem to be no-brainers for me as well, and I've been in the industry for 30 years. But yes, one of the things and one of the reasons why I actually have mentioned this, but I've been involved with UTIP is because working on retention and recruitment. And so uh, if people respond to money, right? And so the hotels are having to adjust and add to their uh, rates or hourly rates in order to retain and recruit better or more housekeepers, if you will. So instead of having all of that burden go on to the employer, it's also helpful to let I don't use burden is probably not the right word, but you're promoting a culture as a company that you care about your team and your housekeepers if you're willing to go and add opportunities for them to increase their earnings through this process, for example, through UTIP. And instead, now you may have to go ahead and bump up your rates to $3 or $4 an hour, which is quite a bit, right, to the bottom line, especially when you're talking about 300 or 400, housekeepers. But to complement that as well, to say, okay, we're going to give you, instead of $15 an hour, we're going to give you $18 an hour now. And on top of that, we believe that through this digitalization of tipping, that we'll add another $3 an hour or $2 an hour to that as well. Now, so the guest wins because they have an easier way of being able to tip. Most people don't carry cash on them anymore. I'm in housekeeping. I spent 6 years of my time in housekeeping. It's sacrilege for me not to tip. I can't tell you how many times I've left the room, didn't tip. And I'm like, oh my God, I would love to be able to have a reminder email and say, thank you for staying with us. Anybody, any comments you'd like to make? And, is there anybody that we'd like to tip? Oh, great. Sitting in my Uber, going back, I get tip. Yeah, tip Maria $5 or whomever. And so that's another important use of technology as well as UTIP's a great example. So there's a combination of all of these things. You want to make the housekeepers' jobs easier. You want to make it more rewarding. The other thing too is if you need 15 housekeepers versus 20 housekeepers, they're going to make more gratuities too, right? And they're not going to be as fatigued when they come back to work, and they're not going to. And then that's another part of looking at technology and utilizing technology and combating labor shortages. It's the right thing to do.